At 74 years old, I sat at a borrowed desk with a pen trembling in my hand, one signature away from losing the only house I had ever owned. The paper in front of me was crisp and polite, full of words I'd been told would make things easier, and my name was already printed neatly at the bottom. All I had to do was sign. If I did, the house my wife and I built our life in would no longer be mine. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet. A clock ticked too loudly on the wall. I remember thinking how strange it was that the end of something so big could feel so quiet. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a pen. That house had been mine since 1979. I raised 2 kids there. I buried my wife from that address. Every inch of it carried a memory, even the crooked step on the back porch I never quite fixed. I paid it off with overtime shifts, skipped vacations, and more than a few nights wondering if I was doing any of it right. I thought once the mortgage was gone, the house would be safe forever. I didn't know how wrong I was. The trouble started after my fall last winter. Nothing dramatic, just a slip on ice and a broken wrist, but it scared my daughter enough to start helping. She found me an advisor, a man with a calm voice and kind eyes who spoke slowly, like I might shatter if he didn't. He said words like protection and planning and reassured me that this was all very common at my age. I trusted him because he didn't sound like a villain. He sounded reasonable. He sounded like someone who knew better than I did. They told me the papers would simplify things. That transferring the house into a special arrangement would keep it out of probate, keep taxes low, keep my family from fighting later. I didn't fully understand it, but everyone else in the room seemed to. When you're the oldest one there, it's easy to let others decide you're tired. The pen felt heavier the longer I held it. My name stared back at me, waiting. I took a breath and leaned forward. That was when my phone, forgotten in my coat pocket, started to ring. The phone kept ringing, a steady vibration against my ribs, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. Everyone in that room was watching me, pretending not to. The advisor cleared his throat softly, the way people do when they're trying to be patient with an old man. My daughter gave me a small, encouraging smile, like this was all already settled. I pulled the phone out anyway. An unknown number. No name. No warning. Just 10 digits I didn't recognize. I should take this, I said, mostly to myself. The advisor nodded, polite but tight. Of course. We'll be right here. I stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind me with a gentle click that sounded final. The carpet runner muffled my footsteps as I answered. Hello. There was a pause, then a woman's voice, careful and professional. Mr. Harris? My name is Elaine Porter. I'm calling from the county recorder's office. I'm sorry to bother you, but I believe you're about to sign a property transfer document today. My stomach tightened. Yes, I said slowly. How did you know that? Another pause. Because a similar document was filed yesterday with your address on it, and there's a discrepancy we're required to flag. Before anything proceeds, I needed to speak with you directly. I leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how thin my legs felt. Discrepancy how? She chose her words carefully. The paperwork would remove your name from the deed entirely. Not temporarily. Not conditionally. Completely. I thought of the pen. The signature waiting. That's not what I was told. I'm afraid that's often the case, she said gently. May I ask, did anyone explain to you that once signed, you would no longer legally own your home? The hallway felt too bright. Too long. I imagined my wife's rosebushes out back, the dent in the fridge from when my son was 12. Gone with one stroke of ink. No, I said. They didn't. There was a silence between us, heavy but not unkind. Then I'm very glad you answered the phone, she said. Because if you sign today, there's very little anyone can do afterward. From inside the room, I heard the faint scrape of a chair, someone shifting, waiting for me to come back and finish what I'd started. I thanked her and said I needed a moment. When I hung up, my hand stayed wrapped around the phone like it might slip away if I let go. I stared down the hallway, at the framed landscape prints and the exit sign glowing red at the far end, and tried to steady my breathing. For a long time, I just stood there. I wasn't angry yet. I was confused. Confusion can be worse. It makes you doubt your own memory, your own hearing. I replayed the conversations in my head, every calm explanation, every reassuring nod. No one had lied outright. They'd just left things out. I walked back into the room slowly. The advisor looked up first. "Everything all right, Mr. Harris?" I sat down, placing the unsigned document flat on the table. "I just spoke to the county recorder's office," I said. "They told me this paper removes my name from the deed entirely." My daughter's smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw it. "Well," the advisor said carefully, "that's technically true, but it's part of the structure we discussed. It's for your benefit." "For my benefit," I repeated. "Meaning I wouldn't own my house anymore." "You'd still live there," he said quickly. "Nothing would change day to day. Except everything that mattered. Ownership. Control. The ability to say no." My daughter leaned forward. "Dad, we went over this. It's just legal language. You always get nervous with paperwork." That stung more than I expected. Not because she was wrong about my nerves, but because she was using them against me. "I'd like a copy of everything," I said. "Every page. Every attachment." The advisor hesitated. "Of course. But signing today would." "I'm not signing today," I said, my voice steadier now. "I need time." The room shifted. I felt it. The patience drained out of the air, replaced by something tighter, sharper. My daughter crossed her arms, frustration creeping into her face. "Dad," she said, lowering her voice, "we're just trying to help you." I looked at the document again, at my printed name waiting patiently at the bottom. For the first time, I wondered how long this moment had been planned without me knowing. And whether the phone call had come in time, or just barely. I took the papers home that afternoon, stacked neatly in a folder that felt heavier than it should have. The house greeted me the way it always did, quiet and familiar, the late light slanting across the living room floor. I set the folder on the kitchen table and didn't open it right away. I walked through each room instead, slow and deliberate, like I was counting something that might disappear if I didn't. The bedroom still smelled faintly of my wife's lavender soap. Her picture sat on the dresser, smiling the same small smile she always had when she thought I was worrying too much. I told her out loud what had almost happened. Saying it made my throat tighten. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while and listened to the house settle around me. That night, I read every page. Not just once. 3 times. The language was careful, almost elegant, but the meaning was clear if you stayed with it long enough. I wouldn't own the house. I wouldn't be able to sell it. I couldn't borrow against it or pass it on without permission. My name would vanish from the deed, replaced by something called a trust, controlled by people who promised they'd always act in my best interest. Promises don't hold much weight once ink dries. The next morning, my daughter called early. Too early. "Did you look at the paperwork?" she asked. "Yes," I said. There was a pause. And I won't be signing it." Her breath sharpened on the other end. "Dad, you're overthinking this. The advisor said this is standard." "I also spoke to the county," I said. "They were concerned enough to call me directly." Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. Finally, she said, "You didn't have to go around us." That word. Us. Like I was already on the outside. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. From the advisor. From my daughter. Even from a lawyer I'd never met who assured me this was all being blown out of proportion. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Calm voices. Gentle pressure. Subtle reminders of my age, my health, how complicated things could get if I insisted on handling them alone. At night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe, wondering how close I'd come to losing it without even realizing it. And whether the call from the county had really been the first warning, or just the first one I'd heard. The pressure didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, spaced out just enough to make me question myself. A voicemail reminding me how complicated estate law could be. A text asking if I'd slept on it yet. A comment about how stressful this must be for everyone involved. Always everyone else. I started to notice how often my age came up. Not directly. Never rude. Just slipped in. At this stage of life. Given your years. We want to make sure you're not overwhelmed. I'd worked 46 years without anyone worrying about that before. One afternoon, my daughter stopped by unannounced. She brought soup I hadn't asked for and concern I hadn't earned. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes searching my face like she was checking for cracks. "Dad," she said, "what if something happens to you before this is settled?" I looked around the kitchen. The burn mark by the toaster. The calendar still turned to last month because I liked seeing my wife's handwriting. "Something always happens," I said. "That's life." She sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I said quietly. "I'm making it slower." Her jaw tightened. "You don't trust me?" The question hung there, heavy and unfair. Trust wasn't a switch you flipped. It was something you protected. "I trust myself enough to ask questions," I said. "That has to count for something." She stood abruptly. "I just hope you don't regret this." After she left, I sat alone for a long time. I thought about how quickly help turns into control if you're not careful. How easy it is to hand over pieces of your life when people you love tell you it's for your own good. That evening, the unknown number called again. This time, I recognized the voice immediately. "Mr. Harris," Elaine said, "I wanted you to know, someone has already tried to move this forward without your signature." I felt my chest tighten as I stared at the walls of the house I almost lost. "And that," she added gently, "is something you deserve to know." I asked Elaine to explain it slowly, and she did. There had been an attempt to file an amended document, unsigned by me but prepared in advance, ready to be rushed through the moment my name came off the original deed. It wasn't illegal yet. Just eager. Too eager. "They assumed compliance," she said. "It happens more often than people think." After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood, feeling the grooves worn in by decades of meals and arguments and quiet mornings. Someone had been planning a future that didn't include my consent. The realization settled in my bones heavier than fear. It felt like betrayal stripped of drama. Practical. Efficient. I made a decision that afternoon. I called a lawyer whose name I found myself, not one suggested to me. A woman my age, sharp-eyed, who listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You were minutes away from losing leverage you would never get back." That word again. Minutes. We put a stop order on everything. Notifications went out. The house, legally, was frozen in place. No changes without me. When my daughter called that evening, her voice was tight, controlled. "They told me you hired someone," she said. "Yes," I answered. "I did." "You didn't think to tell me first." "I didn't think I needed permission." She exhaled slowly. "You're letting strangers get into your head." I almost laughed at that. "I'm letting facts in," I said. "There's a difference." The call ended without goodbye. That night, I walked through the house again, touching the walls, the banister, the doorframes where pencil marks still measured my kid's height. I realized how close I'd come to being a guest in my own life, allowed to stay as long as I behaved. The phone sat silent on the counter. I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. When it rang again, I had the sense the next call wouldn't be calm or careful at all. The call came the next morning, just after 9. I knew who it was before I answered. My daughter didn't bother with pleasantries. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm protecting my house," I said. Her voice rose despite herself. "You're blowing this up. The advisor says you're confused about how these things work." That word again. Confused. I let it sit between us. "Then he can explain it to my lawyer," I said. There it was. The crack. "You don't need a lawyer," she snapped. "You need to trust your family." I closed my eyes. Trust shouldn't feel like pressure. "If this was so harmless," I said, "why did someone try to file paperwork without my signature?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was colder. "You're imagining things." "I'm not," I said. The county confirmed it. Silence stretched long enough that I could hear my own breathing. Finally, she spoke, slower now. "Dad, do you have any idea what happens if this falls apart? Taxes. Fees. Delays. You could lose the house anyway." The fear in her voice was real. Or maybe just well practiced. I couldn't tell anymore. "I'd rather lose it honestly than give it away quietly," I said. She hung up without another word. That afternoon, my lawyer called. "They're pushing," she said. "Harder than before." "Can they do anything?" I asked. "Not without you," she said. "But people who expect compliance don't like hearing no." I looked out the window at the yard, at the oak tree I planted the year my son was born. Leaves were starting to turn. Time moved whether you were ready or not. That evening, as the sun went down, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This one didn't feel official or polite. It felt personal. I let it ring twice before answering, already knowing that whatever came next would change how things stood between us forever. "Dad," my son said. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, maybe months. He always let his sister handle things. Hearing him now felt like another line had been crossed. "What is it?" I asked. "You're scaring her," he said. No greeting. No concern for me. Just that. I sat down slowly. "I almost lost my house," I said. "Did she tell you that part?" He sighed, like I was being difficult on purpose. "She's trying to help you manage things. You're not as sharp as you used to be." That one landed hard. Not because it was cruel, but because it was said so casually. "I was sharp enough to catch what you all missed," I said. "Or hoped I wouldn't notice." "That's not fair," he said. "You're making this adversarial." "I didn't start it," I said quietly. "I just stopped going along." There was a pause. Then he said something that told me everything I needed to know. "Look, if you don't sign, this is going to get ugly. There are options. Conservatorship, 4-1. The word echoed in my chest. Conservatorship. Control, dressed up as care. "You'd really do that?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "We just want what's best." After the call ended, the house felt different. Not smaller. Just lonelier. I realized then that the hardest part wasn't almost losing the house. It was realizing how easily my own children could imagine a future where I no longer had a say. My lawyer moved fast. Letters were sent. Boundaries drawn in clear, unforgiving language. The threat faded once it met resistance. Funny how quickly concern disappears when it can't command. A week later, Elaine called one last time. "The attempted filings have stopped," she said. "Your house is secure." I thanked her and hung up. Relief came, but it was quiet, incomplete. I stood in the living room as evening light filled the space, knowing the danger had passed. What I didn't know yet was what the cost of stopping it would be. The cost came quietly, the way real losses usually do. No shouting matches. No dramatic ultimatums. Just distance. Calls that stopped coming. Holidays that were suddenly complicated. I stayed in the house, but I no longer felt welcome in the lives of the people who once ran through its halls. At first, that hurt more than I expected. I'd tell myself I was fine, that I'd done the right thing, but there were nights the silence pressed hard. I missed the sound of my grandchildren's voices. I missed the version of my children I thought I knew. I even missed the illusion of being needed. Then, one morning, I realized something else. I was sleeping better. The knot in my chest had loosened. I drank my coffee slower. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I had my lawyer update everything properly, on my terms. Clear instructions. No ambiguity. When I signed those papers, my hand didn't shake. I knew exactly what I was doing. That made all the difference. Sometimes I sit on the back porch and watch the light move across the yard, the same way my wife used to. The house creaks and settles, familiar as my own bones. It's still mine. Not just legally. Spiritually. Every memory still has a place to live. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy. I tell it because I was lucky. A call came through at the last possible moment. If it hadn't, I might be telling this from somewhere else, wondering how it all slipped away. If you're listening to this and someone is rushing you, soothing you, telling you not to worry your head about the details, slow everything down. Ask questions. Take your time. Your life's work deserves that much. At 74, I learned that holding on isn't about refusing change. It's about knowing when letting go isn't generosity, it's surrender.